and flew F-80s, air to ground, gunnery, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. So at least I hit the rag a few times. A lot of guys never even hit the rag.
Really?
But the old 89 would go to 40,000 feet though.
Really?
And flew the 101 over there, and I loved it. That plane, I only flew it in the daytime. The air conditioning was zilch.
Really?
But and you just, when you come back and land, you'd just be soaking wet with sweat. These Viet Cong would fire their ground-to-ground missiles, rockets, into the base there. Then we'd fly the 101 at about, well, we'd fly it around Saigon there at about 200 or 180, 200 knots, low level at 500 feet, taking big pictures of the ground, trying to locate where they were set up. The guy was shooting at the planes on the base with some kind of rifle. I remember a couple of guys were going out to set up in the 101s, and they were climbing up the ladder to get in the cockpit, and bullets ricocheted off the ladder.
Really?
Yeah, but they,
oh wow.
the ground security there found out where they were and blasted them out of that church tower. One engine flamed out. The plane yawed back and forth quite a bit, not violently, but anyhow, that was about 2,000 feet above the ground, and the plane was going down like a bomb. All right, my name is Jack David Bond, and I was born here in Dallas in 1929, and grew up in South Dallas on Hamburg Street, and in Marshall down to about 3. And I went to Sunset High School and graduated from there in 1946 and in ROTC. Then from there I went to Texas A&M, graduated in 1951, and then went into the Air Force, Lackland Air Force Base, where I first reported. And it was just a few months later that I started in flight school, Malden Air Base, Missouri, and class of 53 Charlie, and took advanced at James Connolly in T-33s. Well, incidentally, in primary flew T-6s, and I'll never forget the first time old Vic Cole put me in the front seat and said, "Okay, now you got to hold," I think it was right rudder, because it tends to move to the left. And I forgot, and I didn't hold that right rudder. We ran off the runway, and old Vic Cole took it over. We jumped the fence, and I thought he was going to wash me out right then. But being from Fort Worth and me from Dallas, well, we got along fine, so I stayed in. And when I graduated from the T-33s at James Connolly, I went to Laughlin Air Force Base down in Del Rio and flew F-80s, air to ground, gunnery, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. And then after that I went to Luke Air Force Base and F-84s. Well, let me back up. When I was at James Connolly flying the T-33s, they were making assignments at that time where all of our students were going to go. And for me, they had signed me to, I don't remember the first assignment, but anyhow, there was someone assigned to fly F-84s, and he was going to go to Korea, of course. And so he backed out. He said, "I'll resign first." And I don't see how you could do that, but anyhow, they called me in and asked me if I would accept it. And of course I said, "Well, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it." So I was assigned to fly F-84s. So then back up again after coming out of Laughlin Air Force Base and F-80s, I went to Luke to fly the F-84s, air to ground. That was very enjoyable. Although it was in the middle of the summer, I think it was June, July, and that old 84 couldn't hardly get off. Matter of fact, a few guys, they just ground right on through the barrier at the end of the runway and out into the field.
Oh. Was that the straight wing or the swept wing version?
That was the straight wing, F-84G, I think it was.
Okay.
And it just was underpowered, but it sure was a good platform for air to ground. And I always got good scores. We had one air to air, and So at least I hit the rag a few times. A lot of guys never even hit the rag.
Really?
And then the war ended over there. Well, it was ceased over in Korea. So at that time, they reassigned me to Hamilton Air Force Base in the 84th Fighter Squadron, flying 94Cs. And so I was there only about 8 months, I guess, something like that. And then they needed someone to go into the 18th Fighter Squadron up to Alaska. And so several of us were assigned to, before we went to Alaska, we went to some base in Minnesota. I can't remember the name of that base, where I checked out in F-89s. And so the whole squadron of us flew F-89Ds, the dogs, up to Fairbanks and Ladd Air Force Base. That F-89, it was so catchy on the brakes, you'd barely touch them, and it jerked. So
Really?
when the guy was checking me out in it, he said, be very careful with those brakes. And of course, most of us didn't realize how sensitive they were. But anyhow, up at Ladd, I thought, oh God, not Alaska, 'cause being from Dallas, Texas, used to, and I dreaded cold weather. But anyhow, once I got up there, we dressed for the climate, and I loved it. It was great. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that tour more, I guess, than any tour I ever had in the Air Force in my 24 years. But,
I've never been to Alaska, but
Oh,
I've
right.
been on a lot of TV shows lately, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful area
It
up
is,
there.
yeah. And hunting and fishing. Oh, we'd go fishing at Big Delta, and almost every cast, this was in the summer, you'd hook a trout, lake trout, maybe 3 feet long.
Wow.
You're only allowed 2, so we'd catch 2, and then you keep fishing. If you've got a bigger one, you'd release one and keep that one. And and then another great diversion from setting alert down on at the hangar was gold panning and sluicing. And I and several guys really liked that gold panning. One old boy in particular was Bob Reed. He ended up shape commander with his 4 stars. And at that time, I ranked him, but he really passed him up in a hurry. But anyhow, I enjoyed that gold pan, and met a lot of nice guys in that outfit too. And we had our last reunion, I think, was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know if we're going to have any more or not, because they're all getting up there in age.
Was that when you were flying the F-89 Scorpion?
Yeah, F-89D Scorpions up in Alaska.
What did you think of that airplane?
Well, I liked it, but it was, compared to the better planes, the faster planes, it was sort of undesirable. You wanted to be in a hot plane. But the old 89 would go to 40,000 feet though.
Really?
And it was a good, plane for Alaska. Flying up there, it was durable, and I flew all over Alaska. I'd fly out to Nome and back, and there was a fighter squadron of F-86As there at Galena, and that was west of Ladd Air Force Base, and I'd fly out there and land, and they had PCP landing there, and they go cloppity cloppity clop, steel matting,
Yeah.
and so we talked to the guys that flying F-86s and actually on the ground, and they'd say, listen, what we'd like you to do now, fly over on past Nome going west towards, the Russian territory, the Little Diomede, and get those boogers to jump up out there. And then we'll set this up with the radar sight to spot them and call us in, because we'd love to tangle with those guys.
The Russians?
Yeah, so I'd fly out over the Little Diomede Islands out there, midway between Alaska and the Russian territory. And they'd jump up, here they'd come, the MiGs, and so we'd turn, the ground radar sites would notify us when to turn. And so we'd fly back, but there never was an engagement between the 86s and the MiGs, but matter of fact, a lot of times the Russians would fly over. I talked to guys from the radar sites when I was up there in Alaska, and they said the MiGs would do flybys for them and wave to them on the coast there. No.
Really?
Yeah, but a couple of times, you know, if you remember back in history, the MiGs did shoot down a Neptune and some other planes, and so we were called. We were on high alert then, and we were scrambling on a few planes, and I never did intercept any of our fighter bombers, but a couple of guys said they were scrambled on the plane, and when they flew up to it, they never saw so many guns aimed at them in all their life. It was a trap for the Russians, you know.
Really?
But anyhow, after I left Alaska in '57, went to the 97th Fighter Squadron out of Newcastle, Delaware. And I was there for only about 6 or 8 months, I guess it was. And then the turn of events for me, I was sent to Tyndall Air Force Base to be a ground radar controller. God, I hated that. But anyhow, I had to get used to it. So I was there, I was at from '57 to 1960. And I got married while I was down there. I met a girl from Panama City, and there were 7 of those girls in that one family. And Ina was her name, or is her name. And from 1960, let's see, I went to Squadron Officer School, and then I ended up, I was sent to Great Falls, Montana, to be in a radar site there. And I was in that, I can't remember the designator of it now, but I was in that outfit for about a year, I guess. And then I went into semi-automatic ground environment. They had a building there, a huge building, in which I became a senior director and a weapons controller. And I was there for about a year. 96, I guess it was. I went back to school again, AFIT, Air Force Institute of Technology. I volunteered for that. And so they sent me back to Texas A&M to get another degree. When I graduated the first time in 1951, before I went in the Air Force, I got a bachelor's degree in mathematics. And the next time I went back in about 65, I was entered into aeronautical engineering. I graduated from that with a degree in that in 1960. I was there only 2 years. Must have been 63 when I went there, A&M. Graduated in 65, and they sent me to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as this was in advanced, it's such a long, funny name, advanced technology and airborne reconnaissance. And I was with, there were about 5 civilian engineers in there, and I was the only military person in it. But they would come up with all kind of ideas and things. It was really an advanced office where contractors would come in with special innovations, devices. For example, the helmet-mounted vision, where you turn and aim, and it turned the guns with it and fire. And then people were studying birds and how they navigated, and I'd interview people like that. And it's all kind of, I was set up to interview these people, and if I thought it merited further review, then I'd go to my boss and report to him, and we'd talk about and have the contractor in, he'd go through it. Then we'd turn it over to someone else to carry on the study effort there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that was really interesting, I tell you. And then, let's see, after that, Wright-Patterson, well, 1967, they sent me to Shaw Air Force Base to check out in the 101. During all this time, I was still on, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and even at Tyndall, I was still on flight status. And while I was at Tyndall, I flew the T-33, and I could take one flight around the United States one week, and it was great, I tell you. Although I didn't like the ground control situation, the flying was great. I could fly anywhere I wanted to.
Nice.
And
everybody that I've ever spoken to that's flown the T-33 just basically loved it.
Oh,
They said it was just an
I got
easy flying airplane.
I got about 4,500 hours, something like that, and of that I got about 2,000 hours in the T-33.
Oh wow!
And but then I flew every kind I guess they had, but except I never flew the 104. No, the F-86. God, I'd love to have flown those. But anyhow, yeah, at Shaw Air Force Base, checked out in the RF-101C, and
that's the Reconnaissance version.
yeah, the Reconnaissance version, and that's sort of curious because that's the very kind of work that I was doing at Wright-Patterson Reconnaissance. But the more I think about that, I was in a lot of things there at Wright-Patterson. Forward-looking laser, looking at the ground stuff. Like we did where you research people's beds, and like they're doing on the tanker today. We did several of those where you have beds, company issued beds, and you study their efforts and everything, and then you determine which contractor is supposed to get the bid, which you think deserves it, and then it goes to Congress, and don't tell them what will happen then. Anyhow, went to Vietnam in July of '67, and flew the 101 over there, and I loved it. That plane, I only flew it in the daytime. The air conditioning was zilch.
Really?
When you come back and land, you'd just be soaking wet with sweat. But usually we'd run low level, about 500 feet at about 400 knots. And then sometimes we'd get a 25 to 30,000 slow roller. We'd take with those big old K1 cameras, and take pictures of the ground. When they were shooting rockets into Tonson, this was the Tet Offensive of '67 and early '68. These Viet Cong would fire their ground-to-ground missiles, rockets, into the base there. And so we were searching for them. We'd fly the 101 at we'd fly it around Saigon there at about 180, 200 knots, low level at 500 feet, taking big pictures of the ground, trying to locate where they were set up. And there was one place near there where there was a church, and they had a missile site set up there, but they were an idiotic bunch of people. The guy was shooting at the planes on the base with some kind of rifle. I remember a couple of guys were going out to set up in the 101s, and they were climbing up the ladder to get in the cockpit, and bullets ricocheted off the ladder.
Really?
Yeah, but
oh wow!
The ground security there found out where they were and blasted them out of that church tower. One incident that occurred there, that was real bad. It was I think it was in August or October, I can't remember now. I had been on a mission and taking pictures in the 101, and on the way back it was weather, and I was coming down through the weather under ground control, radar control, and just as it broke out, there was a helicopter right in front of me.
Really?
And jerked back on the stick to the bottom, went right through his rotors, and one engine flamed out. The plane yawed back and forth quite a bit, not violently, But anyhow, that was about 2,000 feet above the ground, and the plane was going down like a bomb. And so I had to, you know, I thought about saving the plane, all that, and I said, I got to get out of here. So I ejected.
Oh, wow.
And the parachute blossomed, and it couldn't have been, 3 to 5 seconds, and I hit the ground. And so at that time, I saw these black-shirted people running towards me. I thought, uh-oh, this is it, because they're, you know, Viet Cong. So I reached for my pistol, and I didn't have it in my holster. I had forgotten it.
Oh, no.
And so anyhow, they weren't Viet Cong. They were the friendlies. And so they were feeding, seeing if they stayed, you know, I couldn't understand what they were saying. They were speaking in Vietnamese, but they made me lay on the ground. They were feeling to see if I was okay. And about that time, an Army helicopter landed, and they got me in a helicopter. This Army kind of did. Took me back to Bien Hoa, and which was, you know, not very far at all. And I put me in a Quonset hut clinic, and I stayed there for about 3 weeks. And the Army started rehabilitating me and get me to do exercise and thing. And then the Air Force says, no, we got to have him back over here at Tan Son Nhut. So they sent a ambulance, an old Army wagon. They took me back to Tan Son Nhut, and they immediately wanted me, you know, said you can't get out of bed. And I didn't like that idea at all. Well, when I got out of the helicopter, when they brought me back from the crash site, I felt okay, but I started walking up the hill towards the operations, and my back started hurting me, something terrible then. So I went straight into the clinic, and they x-rayed me, and they saw that my spine I had fractures in it. And so I'd have spasms from it, and my God, that would hurt.
Wow.
And the least movement would bring it on. So anyhow, they you know, rehab, the Army was doing me. I was improving pretty well, but then they took me back to Tan Son Nhut and put me to bed, and they said, you know, you can't even, you're going to have to use the bed duct. You can't even go to the bathroom. I said, I can't do that. And so instead I used the bathroom every time. I couldn't lay there in the bed and do something like that. So anyhow, they sent me back to the Philippines, Clark Air Base, the hospital there. That was in August, I guess it was August, October. I can't remember when, October I guess it was, because I was there only a couple of months. And then I came back to Tan Son Nhut, and they, you know, they checked me out again to 101. I started flying my missions again. And then come about July of '68, why, rotated back to the States, and they sent me right back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But instead of going into the this research business that I had been in, I went to the helicopter SPO, and there I became there was another guy in charge of it, and I was second in charge of that mission support branch of the helicopter SPO. And it wasn't just helicopters. We handled all kind of different tasks that were set up, special kind of tasks for the Air Force. For example, the O2, the pusher type plane built by Cessna, we had reworked some of those and sent 500 of them over to Vietnam. And the way we did it, when we had Cessna take the plane to a private contractor in Wichita Falls, and they put it was 50-gallon drums inside the cockpit there, 2 or 3 of them.
Wow.
And we'd fly, we had civilian pilots would hire, and they'd fly those O2s out to Hawaii, then over to Anderson, and to Guam, and into the Philippines, and then over to Vietnam. Sent 500 of those. We only lost about 3 or 4. Wow. So I was handling that project, and the logistics of it were very interesting. We, matter of fact, when Marcus was still in charge of the Philippines, he started charging us taxes on all this stuff we were sending to support the O2s. And so that was one of the type problems we ran into, sending those over there. But at the same time, I was taking over the control of the OV-10. The Navy had that program. And so, as you know, it transitioned from the Navy to the Air Force, but at the same time we had to transition the maintenance of it, logistics, to SAMA. And so I was handling that part of it. And this, for a short period of time, I was in charge of the OV-10 program. And I got to fly it one time, and that was a great bird. It was like flying a kite almost. I enjoyed it very much. But then when there's a lot of other things in the mission support program that I was into, but in 1973, why, our mission support started closing down. Well, before that, I remember one special thing I need to mention. I was in the Vietnamization program, where they were trying to turn over all of the weapon system control, maintenance and everything to the South Vietnamese, just like they're doing in Afghanistan and Iraq now. And so we had to get the manuals on these different aircraft and systems translated from English into Vietnamese. And so I had several Vietnamese officers come over, and they were working within the SPO there to help us read all this. We had translators in New York that did the translation, but then these Vietnamese officers would read that, and they'd tell us, well, for example, they were talking about using a toothbrush to clean the bearings in a wheel. And so that had, of course, to be changed. But anyhow, we did all that, and that was very interesting. And then when all this was coming to an end, and those officers went back to Vietnam, Vietnam fell. And so I guess a couple of those old boys were killed, but one of them got back to the States. And he was in the last surge. You remember when South Vietnam was falling. He ran with his wife and kids and got on a plane and got out of there in time. And so when he came back to Ohio, so we set up we had a lot of guys contribute money. We got him a car and a house and for his kids, and we just we supported him, all the guys in my outfit. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And so that old boy got him a good job with an electronics company. He had an engineering degree from France. So he did quite well. He has a home in Huber Heights, and his kids all they were very studious. One's a doctor and the others are professors, today. That was, of course, I'm talking about back in 1973 and today. And finally, Jean, he developed Alzheimer's, and I still communicate with him and his wife today.